Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
The Ocean Sailor Podcast, brought to you by Ocean Sailor Magazine and Kraken Yachts.
Well, hello and welcome to Ocean Sailor Podcast, episode 13, no less. An unlucky number, but certainly not an unlucky podcast, I'm sure. With me, anyway, Dick Durham, and of course across the road, or down the road a piece, is Dick Beaumont. Good morning to you, Dick.
Yeah, hi, Dick. Yeah, everything good?
Yeah, fine. I tell you what, I did like our new signature tune. I'm a bit of a sucker for the fiddle, and it was a real shanty-esque type of music. You know, I can imagine us hauling on the main brace. Not that, of course.
I really liked it. That's well done, Tristan, for that one.
Good,
it's
isn't it?
Yeah, diddly 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 music.
It was.
All good. Yeah, brilliant.
Not that the Solent rig has a main brace, but we never mind. No, it's very good. I did like it. It got me in the mood for the sailing season, so excellent stuff. Let's hope the listeners like it as much as we do.
It'd be good to get some feedback on that. Tell us what you think. Any good ideas will be gratefully ignored.
We're going to talk today to Brian Trautman of Delos, the sailing yacht Delos.
I'm really looking forward to this one, Dick. It should be quite an interesting one.
Well, it should be.
A mind-boggler.
I think so. It's with, of course, Brian Trautman, who has appeared in the magazine previously, Ocean Sailor Magazine, on his yacht Delos and the adventures he's had with her. But this is a bit different because, goes into crew troubles and the psychology of crew to some extent, the fear, the incompetence, the skullduggery, but also the wonder, the bonding, and the heroism of crew, Dick, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating subject for me, and we've kind of kept it back a little bit because we knew Brian said that he'd like to come on the podcast, bit of a feather in our cap. Delos is right up there with the big boys when it comes to YouTube channels. I think he's got 770,000 subscribers. And so, yeah, I wanted us to keep that one back, because it's an intriguing subject and there's so many interesting things that come out. And as we talked, Dick, before we started to go on air, you know, I think it's a theme we should follow because there's some fabulous stories out there. Some amazing.
There's no question of that. Everyone has got a great story about what happens in the sort of mind when you're at sea. We've all got them ourselves, and everyone we speak to have got them. So yes, you're right. It's a recurring theme, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You know, and one of the things we want to do is interview or bring on the podcast, I should say, David Wilkinson, who you've interviewed before, again for Ocean Sailor Magazine. Yes. And if we want to get into the real heavy psychology, David's the guy to talk when he did the reenactment of the Bligh voyage, 3,500 miles in an open whaler, more or less. It's pretty astonishing. So there's lots to look forward to, and
got to be the epitome, isn't it, of the very subject. So yes, I'm looking forward to that one.
You know, so I think without more ado, Dick, let's bring Brian on and hear his great stories. He's had a lot more crew, I think, than I've had, although I've had my fair share of interesting incidents. But hopefully Brian's going to have some really good stories to tell us. So, bring him in, Dick.
We shall look forward to that. I think I've got it in my mind for some reason. He's got 50. He's had 50 different crew over the years. So, anyway, I'm sure he'll tell us. So, yes, please, Brian, come in. Okay, so welcome, Brian Troutman, to the Ocean Sailor Podcast. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your stories about being in the psychiatrist's cockpit, along with Dick Beaumont, of course.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brian. Thanks very much for coming on. I think we've kept a particular subject on the back burner for some time, which is the psychology of sailing across oceans with crew. And I'm pretty damn sure that you're going to have some great input into that. And I think we're in for an interesting little story or two.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today, guys. I think I've got a few interesting stories. We've had a few crew on board, some mishaps, some good times, but yeah, it's a cool subject to talk about.
It seems to me, having spoken at some length to both of you over the past, that you can't read a book by its cover. We all know that, but somehow the ocean is the sort of greatest casting couch that there is. You'd agree with that, I think.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something that I've mentioned to you before, which is what I call the Midnight Confessional. I don't know if you recognise this, Brian. I don't know. You know, it seems to me when you're sailing along under a perfect sky. I mean, when there's too much action and there's too much wind and everybody's a bit stressed or trying to pretend they're not, it seems to me that it doesn't occur. But when it's a really, really nice night, there's a clear sky and you can see the whole firmament. You sit there, you know, doing perhaps a watch changeover, and suddenly you feel like a Catholic priest sitting in the confessional. And this has happened to me dozens and dozens of times. Suddenly people have started telling me about their previous faux pas, previous kind of life experiences. I mean, I once had a crew sailing with me, and her husband was on the boat. I'm not going to name any names, but her husband was on the boat as crew as well. And, you know, we were sitting there and she's brought up a nice cup of coffee and we're looking up and it's, oh, isn't this so wonderful? And she suddenly tells me, when you see things like this, it makes you want to, expose your soul. I thought, okay, and where's this going? And she said, because, nobody really knows this amongst my current bunch of people that I know, but I used to be a prostitute.
Good grief.
It's honest to God true. And she said, oh yeah, she said, I won't name his name, X, it doesn't know. And, I've often thought back at that and I thought, oh God, where are we going to go from here? And it was, it was as much as I could do to shut her up. I got off watch a bit quick, I might tell you.
Did he find out?
No, I kept stum and I told her. We then moved into the next bit, which another one, guarantee you've had dozens of times, Brian, is, is there a God? And looking up, and she moved into that next. And so I thought, here we go. And, she's looking up at the firmament and it's a big story that comes up, doesn't it?
Well, I like to think about the ocean as kind of the great equalizer in that, I think alcohol is another great equalizer in that when people drink, they all sort of like blend together. But, the ocean doesn't care about who you are or your experience level or your race or ethnicity or color of your skin or language you speak. The ocean treats everybody the same. And I think because of that, it kind of allows people to be themselves and just speak freely and open their minds. And it's kind of a cool situation. And we've always said, like, what happens at sea kind of stays to sea, just like, you'd make a crazy trip to Vegas, exposing yourself. I've got kind of an interesting story about, because we're talking about crew and the implications of psychology and crew dynamics and these sorts of things. And, a number of years ago, we were in Auckland, New Zealand, and we had stopped because we ran out of money. And so I was doing day work as an engineer on super yachts. And so I was working in Auckland because it's like a super yacht base for the cyclone season, working alongside a guy. I'm definitely not going to mention his name just in the case that he's listening. But we were working, we were getting along well. He was a good worker, a solid guy. And he wanted to get his yacht master because he wanted to work professionally on boats as a skipper. And he said, hey, the only thing I need to do to get my yacht master is to do like 1,000-mile sail and do my celestial sightings. And I said, okay, that's cool. We're actually sailing from New Zealand to Fiji in about 2 weeks. You can join us. You can be crew. It'll be good experience for you. It'll be a win-win for everybody. And so we're sitting in the marina in Auckland, getting ready to set out. And I decide I'm going to take the crew out for dinner. We're going to go get Chinese, have one last dinner out before we're all stuck on a boat together for 7 to 10 days. I'm sitting up at the counter ordering the food for everybody. I turn around and I see my new crew outside of the window. It's like a Chinese restaurant with tables, big glass windows outside. And he's dropped his pants down to his knees, and he's literally pressing himself up against the glass window, just having a great fun time of it. And I'm thinking, well, what the heck is going on? I'm about to get on a boat with this guy. What's this? Immediately, the owner sees this and, of course, starts calling the police, as you would do when somebody exposes themselves in your Chinese restaurant. I leave. I'm like, okay, I don't want any part of this. When the police show up, I go to the boat. But the police come. They take him to the police station.
That New Zealand to Fiji sail.
Yeah,
New Zealand to Fiji sail is a 7-day trip or so, isn't it?
And I'm going to be stuck at sea with this guy.
Locked up with a brilliant.
So I'm sitting there in the afternoon. We've gotten our takeout, and then the police come up to the boat, and they say, "Okay, do you know this person?" I say, "Yes, I know this person." "Is he a crew on your boat?" I say, "Yes, he's crew on the boat." And they say, "Okay, we're going to ask him to leave the country since he's crew on your boat and he's signed on. He's your responsibility, and we're releasing him under your cognizance, and now you have to sail with him out of the country." Which is quite an interesting position to be in, because
you're now lumbered.
It was legally out of my hands, and I was literally required by Customs and Immigration Border Control to get him out of the country. That was one of the interesting things. We did end up sailing with him to Fiji. He actually was kind of a sort of a guy that could not just touch the rum bottle. When he touched the rum bottle would be gone. And so that made us a dry boat. We're normally a dry boat at sea, but that made us a dry boat, even before we left on the trip. And then when we got to Fiji, where we promptly dropped him off at the nearest backpackers resort and shook hands and sent him on his way. It turns out he did get his yacht master, and he sent me a message a few years later, and he was a skipper on a rather large boat, like a 22-meter catamaran, professionally for a number of years, and straightened himself out and made a great success of himself. So you kind of got to be careful about who you go to sea with.
And
the dynamics.
Well, don't you? And I mean, you're dead right. The alcohol thing, alcohol, no alcohol, dry ship, no dry ship, I think is a really big issue for skippers. And the problems I've had revolve around issues with friends, as well as, I think friends are even more difficult to deal with. And I'll hold my hands up. I don't like to run a dead dry ship at sea. But the problem I think that exists is that everybody's got a different idea of what's a reasonable amount of alcohol. And you also run into the situation that you just said, with some people just have to have one and then can't stop. We like to have a sundowner, and, a beer with dinner, and generally we try and make that a communal kind of time rather than everybody just having their time, they're having their food individually. But it's a difficult, to pardon the pun, it's a difficult route to navigate. And what I've done in the end, and I've gone down exactly that route you just said, saying, okay, it's going to have no other choice, it's got to be a dry ship. That's not really entirely fair on everybody, and I've still had to resort to that, even with what I then brought in as a rule, is a maximum of 2 drinks in any one off-watch time, and no alcohol within a 4-hour period of a watch. And that's worked quite well, but I've still had people hiding bottles of vodka under their pillows and stuff like that. And of course, if somebody's going to tell you lies, and unfortunately, when people are involved in drugs and alcohol in a serious sense, they do tend to embellish the truth at the very best.
Yeah,
it is a difficult one, and then you've got no choice, have you? As the skipper, you've got no choice to just resort to a dry ship.
In Brian's case, I mean, the guy revealed we use the word flaw, before you even set off. So this wasn't psychology. This wasn't the ocean reducing crew down to the common denominator that you discovered to your horror at sea. He'd already revealed it, but because he was on your boat, you were obliged to take him. So that's a bit tricky, I suppose. Did he cause you more problems after he mooned?
We were right after we left Auckland. We sailed up to the Bay of Islands, which is kind of like the north part of New Zealand, and that's typically where you wait for weather before heading to Fiji. And there's a big low that came through, and we were on the hook for, I think it was 3 or 4 days with 35 to 40 knots of winds. So at the anchor, not able to get off, just waiting for weather. And I woke up to a commotion at like 2:30 in the morning of him literally running around deck like a madman after drinking a bottle of rum. And I was like, well, that's dangerous for you. It's dangerous for me because I'm responsible, and you could fall over blowing 35 knots. Nobody's ever going to hear from you again. And then we sort of had to like talk as a crew about it and say, hey guys, look, this is the deal for the next, X number of weeks. It's just going to be a dry boat because of this issue. And, since then it kind of changed our policy a little bit, because we kind of had this idea that we would just meet people, they would come on board. But now there's sort of a vetting process, and we'll tend to have like a little party when people first arrive, and we'll just watch people, because it's quite easy to tell when people are they can consume and they can consume responsibly versus somebody that's just pounding drink after drink after drink, and that's kind of a real tell.
Right.
It's a clue, isn't it?
Yeah, if you just meet them and they're getting super wasted, then you can kind of be like, okay, this is going to be an issue.
But just interrupt there, Brian. What's amused me as you're telling me that story, or telling us and all the listeners that story, is that you prefaced that by saying you wouldn't mention his name. I think there's very little chance whoever's listening to that won't recognise themselves. How many people have gone and stuck their backside on the Chinese window?
I hope it was his backside.
To make matters, it was his front side. That was
right.
That was the worst part of it.
Oh no!
Yeah, right, pressed right up against the glass.
He wasn't even mooning then.
The old Frankenbeans.
Mooning, I suppose. Oh dear.
Oh God! Do you know something? It must be that New Zealand to Fiji run, because I went the other way round. I went back and forth, but I did a run from Fiji to New Zealand, and I had a really good crew. He'd been with me for some time, but he had that same trigger that you're talking about, which we had warned and stayed away from at sea, which was one drink and drink to oblivion, and he did that. We were leaving and got a good forecast, but there was just he and I, so it's going to be a hard trip. It's 3 hours on, 3 hours off. It's going to be a hard trip, and I said to him, listen, X, whatever you do, I know you're going to say cheerio to so and so and so and so, but just as a favour, that's absolutely don't get blasted, because we this is heavy. And there was a fair bit of weather to expect to come as well. He said, oh yeah. And of course he came back, and the next thing I heard was 1 o'clock in the morning. He's going through the alcohol cabinet on the boat at the time was Moonshadow, and they're crashing and banging, and he's barely standing up. Of course, it was me that suffered for the following. He suffered a fair bit. It was me that suffered for the following 24 hours while he was straightening himself out.
Yeah.
But
no, it's this is all part of, and the point is, I think, that whilst all of these things happen on the land as well, the point and the interest that I've got is they all become so dreadfully under the spotlight and first person, in the first person, you can't hide from it when you're on a small sailing boat, can you, Brian?
There's no secrets at sea. If somebody's got the shits, everybody knows about it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, Dick, I know that you've mentioned before that, which I always struck me as quite a good idea, before you're setting off with a new crew unknown to you, and perhaps some of them are inexperienced as well, you just go off from whichever port you're in to somewhere quite nearby and have an anchorage. You only maybe just an hour or two, and anchor off and have that first night there to get everybody sort of, so to speak, bedded down before you set off on
I do.
an offshore passage?
Yeah, it's not to necessarily suss out the nutters and the incompatible crew, but it does it does give you a heads up. But I do that, Brian, more to establish or try and help people deal with the first round of seasickness that a lot of people do get. I do it because I believe that, and I generally I'll do a 2-hour run or something like that, 3-hour run, and then anchor up, have a meal on board, get to know each other without being under the rigours of sailing, and then give them a night for their heads to sort themselves out. And I think that does really help. But as you say, I have on long time ago, I have on one occasion when I did that, thought this person's not the person that I thought they were, and made the hard decision to tell them it wasn't going to work out. I mean, and that's the bit, I guess, that, talking about the psychology that affects skippers. I think people are not generally prepared for the position that a skipper has and the decision he's got to take. Do you think so, Brian?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, and we do the same thing. So, the one we do like a first night on the hook, we call it. So we get off the dock, we let people unplug, get used to the motion of the boat, being a little bit more quiet, and then we're waiting for weather, maybe we're just waiting. But I think that's a fantastic tactic in general. To the other point, I'm thinking about something that also recently happened, and I actually wasn't on board because I left Delos for a period of 6 months when we went back to have our daughter Sierra. So I went to Sweden, and Brady continued across the Atlantic, and he decided to take some crew on. A really nice guy that we'd met somewhere in the Caribbean, fantastic, like got along well, very active, like really wanted to have a career working in like the marine industry, like professionally on boats. So we actually bought him a ticket. We flew him over to Europe. He got on board Delos. Brady was the skipper at this time. And then about 72 hours before their weather window is coming, they're supposed to depart. Brady gives me a call in Sweden. He's like, Brian, I'm having problems with this person. I think he might be bipolar. I think he might actually have some mental issues because one day he's really up, the next day he's really down. He'll lash out at the crew, particularly the women on board, bossing them around when he's like the new guy here. And I'm thinking about asking him to leave. And what do you think about that? And I said, brother, look, you're about to go on from the Canaries to the Caribbean it's a significant sail. It's like a 3,000 something odd mile sail. Do you really want to be dealing with that dynamic on board? You have other crew. If you even have any doubt in your mind that this could be a disaster, then we should just buy him a ticket and fly him home. And that's what we did. So it was sad because I know he was disappointed. Everybody was disappointed, but I still do think it was for the best, for sure.
It never gets better, it never gets better. If somebody's difficult on shore, it gets often a lot worse, even with people that you think are all right, and then actually you go to sea, and this is, back to the profound experience that people have of suddenly being, sailing across an ocean, and then things do change in people that start out being or seeming quite capable and excellent and rounded people, but let alone going off with a wild card. I really agree with that. I mean, I think this touches on the point that I wanted to bring up, and I guess we have now covered, which is that the skipper's chair is quite a lonely one because it can't be a democracy, can it?
No.
And at the same time, you don't want to be the kind of skipper that is Captain Bligh. I mean, I've met a few of those in my time, and God, I'd be horrified if anybody thought, that I was like that. But your decisions that you're taking are for the best interest of the whole crew, not against any one particular person. And you just have to do what's right and safe for the boat, don't you?
Which many say that's what Bligh was doing, of course. He wasn't a particularly good man manager, I don't think.
Well,
it depends who you believe, Bligh or the other guy, Christian.
I like to think of a boat as being sort of a pressure cooker for emotions. And so if people have emotions or difficulties, then put them in that sort of a close contact environment that can be stressful. Not always, but sometimes, then it can really be like a recipe for disaster. And I've seen so many couples, husband-wife teams, because that's what's typically are out there cruising, or kind of husband-wife or boyfriend-girlfriend teams that think that, okay, we're going to have all this time. It's going to be amazing. We have issues in our relationship, but this is going to smooth them out. And it ends up kind of exacerbating the issues.
But Brad, do you mean they've gone to sea? You think they'd gone to sea to improve their relationship and
yes,
and the lumpy road that their relationship? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Well, I'm saying
I'll
put it if you have a pressure cooker and you put in bad ingredients, it's going to turn out like a disaster. If you put in good ingredients, you're going to get a delicious meal out of it. So.
Yeah.
So it's a case of till Delos do us part.
God, here we go.
Yeah.
You haven't experienced Dick's dreadful puns.
Sorry about that. It'll be edited out later. You're fine. I'm wondering though, on that, when you talk about that, the pressure cooker thing, it's a really good metaphor to use. But I'm wondering if it works ever the other way, when you've perhaps had a tough passage, and somebody, a new crew member, has been fine, has stepped up to the ropes and all the rest of it, and stood his watch or her watch, and then has got ashore and is so relieved to be back on terra firma, has gone kind of mad then.
Well, I've seen people completely morphed and changed for the better.
Really?
One crew in particular that met us in South Africa, and we were sailing to Brazil. There was a point where we sat down and said, hey, I know you're not happy. There's some stuff going on in your head where it's going to be a total of 2 months by the time you figure our stops in St. Helena and Ascension Island before we get to Brazil. Like, are you up for this task? Because there's no airport there. There's no flying out. And she said, yes, I'm up for it. And she turned out to be spectacular. Just really? a complete joy to sail with, and really evolved as a person and a sailor. And so, it can go both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely, I've experienced people going in both directions. I've seen, people that I thought might be a weak link and were meek and mild, step forward and turn themselves into the best crew you could possibly have. The step forward guy that's always going to be reliable. And I've seen big tough guys that I was absolutely sure were going to be really great crew crumble into almost babies. And I think that's the psychology of the sea enacting its spell on people and making them perhaps face themselves. I this thing about the Midnight Confessional, but also leads on to, I think, the time at the helm at night on your own is wonderful for the soul, and it gives you an opportunity that I think you've rarely got in life, to really look inside yourself and just decide whether the things that you've always done have been the best things and done for the right reasons. And I think I don't know about you, Brian, but I don't think I've ever done a sea crossing, even a short one, without playing Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Southern Cross.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's like sometimes I think that being on night watch and hand steering it's almost like a form of meditation. I mean, it can be very, very therapeutic.
I do.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that both of you seem to have had this similar experience, that when the going is tough, if the weather is heavy and there's things to think about, all the crew are engaged with that. But once that's off, if it's a calm night, there's the heavens are ablaze with stars, it's a lovely, beautiful night. That's when people come out of themselves. They want to confess. I'm wondering if either of you think that that's because they're relieved to have survived that heavy weather, and all of a sudden, it's the bad stuff's over for now. I don't know.
Well, there's definitely the bonding experience that comes in groups of people after intense moments when you survive something, right, or you pull together. It brings everybody together, and it raises endorphin levels, and people become good friends, and you make lifelong friendships doing this, right? I mean, I still talk to the people I did my first sail with. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I remember before I left Seattle, very nervous. I wanted to have a really solid medical kit on board. And so I visited a marine physician, and one of the things that he prescribed for the medical kit was diazepam. And I'm like, well, what is that? And he's like, well, it's generic Valium. And he's like, this is something that I always recommend people to come on board, because, what if you're out there and somebody literally freaks out? This is something that could actually really help take away their anxiety, their tension, and calm them down, and maybe avoid a situation before they hurt themselves or somebody else on the boat. So, I was really confused, but now after that, I see how that could be helpful to have those as a last resort.
Yeah, I'd never even considered that. I mean, I've back to finding out about people and their inner soul, and that they, as you just said earlier, they can't. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. Unfortunately, I've on several occasions got talking to people on this Midnight Confessional, and they've said to me, well, of course I've been on diazepam for 15 years, or on Mogadon or some other, and I've gone, oh, really? Oh, hadn't really understood. That probably equates to the reasons that you're not really firing on all cylinders. And I mean, I've had that, but to kind of impose diazepam on somebody, I don't know how I'd get on with that one, Brian. But I can understand. I can really understand. I'll tell you what is a funny thing then. Isn't it true? It seems to be true that after you've gone and done a hard sail, a long crossing, or a hard, even relatively short crossing, and as you say, there is nothing more bonding than a team of guys and girls. Team, doesn't matter, all girls, all guys, a mixed team. There's nothing more bonding than actually depending and having to depend on each member of the crew to get you through. And I think that is a fantastic thing. But I also think that it's occurred to me as you were saying that when you've done a passage, you either become lifetime friends of the people you've done it with, or you never want to see them again.
Or you never want to get on a boat again.
No, you never want to. I've had definitely a few. I just thought, I can go another 5 years without seeing that guy again. It's just driven me up the bloody wall.
We've had last time I counted, it was over 50 some odd people sail with us from probably 12 different countries at this point. And I can say that realistically, the times we've had problems, I can probably count them on the fingers of one hand, probably on two fingers. Yeah. And I've already talked about both the stories. And so, most of I'd say 90+% of everything has been really, really good bonding experiences.
Are you able to transport that ashore, Brian? I mean, after having 50 people sail with you long distance, which is quite something, could you now sit in a bar on a dockside and look at somebody and say, yeah, they're all right, they're not all right? Or does it not work like that? It has to be at sea before you really know what they're like.
I don't know. You'd have to ask me after you get a couple shots of rum in me. and
all right.
And then the same.
No, well, I'll answer for me. No.
Okay.
No, you can't tell.
Can't tell.
It's why I was saying, Dick, the meek and mild suddenly step forward and become, your best embodiment of a crew member, and other people, just fall apart.
Mountain becomes a mouse.
Well, they do. They unfortunately do, and so I no. I think I must confess, I mostly sail now with friends. I quite rarely sail with and family. I quite rarely sail with what amounts to strangers, and I mean I have. I mean the worst one I had was, unfortunately, I had a couple of a guy and a girl that were going to come and crew with us on another trip, actually, from New Zealand. That trip was from New Zealand to Oz, and we went to a barbecue at their house, and it was great. And they've been together for 2 years or 3 years or something, and they wound up splitting up a fortnight before we were due to leave. And the guy phoned me up and he said, "Look, I'm ever so sorry about this, but X and I have split up, and but I don't want you to hold that against her, and we might be okay to come as individuals." And I said, "No, that's not going to work. No, don't want to do that. Sorry," and all that. He said, "Well, look, she's sailing from New Zealand back to her plan was to sail back from New Zealand to Oz, particularly because she wanted to see her father, and she hasn't seen her father for quite some time. I think it was a pretty cheap flight, but anyway, I stood for the story. And she's a great cook, and I'll bow out and let her go if you're not happy for us both to go." And I agreed. And she was quite a pretty girl, and that caused a dynamic within the crew that was not good. It wasn't good for the crew. Not the girl's fault, I might add, in that particular case, but actually the guy's fault, because everybody was, the great pretender, and wanted to try and impress this particular girl, and blah blah blah. But she was then, and they were not then, reacting and sharing out the normal share and chores, and if she was being asked to go and do something in particular, might have been cook a sandwich, might have been to cook a meal or do something or haul a sail, and you'd have two guys trying to kind of push her out the way, say, no, I'll do it for you, don't worry about it. And it caused huge problems for her, and I really had to sit down. Obviously I had a crew of 5, including myself and her, and I had to say to the 3 guys, this is not working, you've got to stop doing this. It's a real imposition you're putting on. "Oh no, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just being friendly." No, they weren't just being friendly, and it was quite obvious they weren't just being friendly to me. And it didn't get better, really. There was an atmosphere. I bet you've had those, Brian, at some time.
If you've seen any of our videos, but there was there's been a few instances where we get a group of people together, and I mean it's a very romantic environment, and you tend to spend a lot of time together with very little distraction, and people get together, they couple up. Most of that stuff really doesn't affect how we kind of operate the boat, and I think a lot of people tend to blow those things kind of out of proportion. Like they see a group of men and women sailing around, and they just assume that, you guys must be having a bunch of orgies on board or something like that. And we're like, well, no. And well, that girl's topless over there. Well, I mean, who cares? She's like my sister, honestly. Like, it doesn't even register that would be kind of a weird thing. I'll
cancel my booking now if it's not the case. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's okay. I mean, we've actually never been in sort of that situation that you just discussed. I don't know why. I think some of it might have been because myself and my brother Brady and my wife Karen, we've all sailed together for so long. When new people join the boat, it's not like there's me as the skipper and then a bunch of new crew join in. It's like, this is the established crew. These are the rules, and now you deal with that. And we've always had a set kind of regiment for everybody. So, everybody has a cleaning schedule. There's no doubts about what you're supposed to clean and when you're supposed to do it. Everybody does it, including myself. We have a cooking schedule. So, it's listed by day. When you cook lunch and you cook dinner, you clean the dishes, you clean the galley, and that's it. So, and everybody does it. So there's no ambiguity or kind of like wondering, is this my job? Should I do this? And we did that after, learning that the first couple of years and being like, well, if we're going to do this, and Karen being Swedish, she loves to write lists and schedules, and that's she's very organized, which I am not. And
that's being listist, isn't
it? Brian, just interrupt you as you go through those points. I'm very interested, and I very much believe in distributing the duties on board. But distributing the duties on board for cooking, I've experienced some pretty horrendous ones there, and I've sort of decided I'll give up and cook myself. I do wind up most of the time, it seems, cook myself. I'll just give you a quick anecdote on that. I have a particularly good friend, and I will mention his name because he knows he's useless. His name is Simon. He's a very great friend. He's the funniest guy you could ever spend any time with, but he is utterly, completely useless. And he sailed with me on several occasions, and he was always trying to help, and by it, trying to help, obviously made things mostly much worse. And on one particular occasion, he said, look, Dick, look, every time we go on a trip, you do the cooking, and I've been doing I've been learning stuff. I said, oh yeah, bro. Oh yeah, Simon. Okay, great. He said, yeah. He said, I'm going to do us a spaghetti bolognese. I know exactly how to do it. I'm going to do a spaghetti bolognese. Let me do it. So I said, all right. Okay. And what he actually did is he tipped all this gear into the saucepan, which was believe it or not, and we were four-handed. It was 2 kilos of mince. It was all of the mince for the whole trip.
God,
put the whole lot in this giant pot. Put the mince in first. Didn't put any onions in. They went in second, and then turned the gas up. Oh, turn the electric up. We don't have gas. Turn the electric up, and added the tomatoes and added the ingredients. And then brought this up, very proud of this. I thought, you know what, there's a bloody funny smell around here. It's burning. It's got to be burning. But I was looking in at the top of the pot and just keep my eye on it. He served it up. The bottom 1.5 inches was complete charcoal.
Yeah.
The pan was ruined and could never be used again. And I just giving everybody cooking duties has got to lead to some. You must have had some laughs with that one.
Yeah, I mean, God, the first one that comes to mind is we had, and I'm going to mention their names because they'll get a kick out of it. These 2 German guys that we'd never met before, Jens and Uli. They were 2 brothers, maybe about 2 years apart. They still live with their parents in Germany, so they had never cooked, and so they flew into Madagascar and met us, and we were sailing to Durban, South Africa. And we're like, okay, here's your cooking day. And he's like, well, I cannot cook. I've never cooked before. My mom cooks for us. I'm like, well, you're going to learn. And we ended up having pretty much raw spaghetti noodles with ketchup that night. It was It wasn't nice. It was pretty terrible.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
But did he learn?
Some people
He did
have
learn.
managed to get through to the.
Did
Some people have managed to get through to the age of, it seems 40 or 50, and they don't even know how to cook an egg.
Yeah, I don't understand.
It's just baffling.
But by the end of the trip, it took about 2 weeks, and we kept on him, and he actually whipped up a couple of fairly decent noodle dishes, and so it's like, here's a cookbook.
There you go.
You can follow directions. Follow these directions. Do what it says here, and you'll be fine.
That was absolutely great, eh? And Brian's brought to the table some very interesting incidents that's happened to him. As you've heard from me, Dick, I've had one or two big eye openers as I've sailed across the ocean.
Yes.
It's great to have him on, and especially with all his experience. And as you said before we started, he's had 50 crew go over his decks. He's had quite a lot of very strange experiences. Not unbelievable to me at all either, because I tell you what I really enjoyed. He coined the phrase, "It's like a pressure cooker," because he's exactly right. You know, once things start to go a little bit wrong, or people start to come really under pressure, the phrase is right, sorts the men out for the boys. So it was great talking.
I mean,
to
in
him.
a funny way, the sort of psychology of crew and sailors is bears out that old saw that the boat will always get you there, but can you handle it? Can the crew handle it? And there's a lot of truth in that. Although, of course, some of the boats we've been discussing over the years won't get you there. A Kraken will.
Well, yeah, you're gonna head back into the discussion and debate that I've been kind of trying to have with this guy Andy Shell, whose position is that, it's just, you can sail across the ocean in any boat.
Yes.
I don't believe that. I think that's radically wrong and radically dangerous.
I agree with you.
And I've asked him to come on this podcast, Dick, but he hasn't stuck his head above the parapet. But that's the same story that you're talking about there. The boats up to it are the crew.
So the gauntlet from Andy Shell remains firmly on the ground, does it still, Dick?
Yeah, he hasn't picked it up.
Oh, well, maybe he will. It'd be nice to talk to him, because I'd love to hear his view and why he so stridently believes it. So, but anyway, we shall see. Well, I was going to ask you, Dick, actually, about, as we're actually on talking about the podcast at the moment, but also to some extent the magazine as well, Ocean Sailor Magazine. I keep stumbling across this thing, Patreon. And I don't know all that much about it, but I think you've looked into this a bit, haven't you, Dick? Patreon? Well,
recently, I tell you, it's very funny you should mention that, because we've recently had quite a lot of emails into Ocean Sailor, and actually on referencing the podcast, saying that people would like to, feel that they'd like to contribute in some way.
Right.
Would
they like my bank account details?
Sure, that'll go across pretty quick. This is all a bit of a mystery thing to me, and so I don't really understand it. As it happens, coming back to Brian and Delos at the moment, they also have a Patreon. I mean, they've got 770,000 subscribers, and I think they've got quite a lot of people that see that they're getting value from their experience of watching the Delos YouTube channel and everything else that Brian has done, and feel that it's right to contribute. And Ocean Sailor is becoming a bigger and bigger magazine. We have nearly 10,000 subscribers now, and that sounds small by comparison to a YouTube channel. But I mean that 10,000 subscribers, by the way, Dickie, probably means that when you consider, they don't use the word subscribers. There's a different word that they use to a readership.
Okay.
Means, you
sounds like a weasel word to me.
Well, I think it is a weasel word, because when you ask for a magazines, you'll know this from Yachting Monthly or Yachting World or My Classic Boat. when you ask for a circulation, they give you a figure that expects or anticipates that 2.5 people look at every copy that's published. That's
right.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
Something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So obviously people can share the Ocean Sailor magazine when it's downloaded, and a lot of people are looking at it on our website without actually subscribing.
Right.
But it does. I don't know if you appreciate this really, but we are now one of the biggest yachting magazines in the world in terms of readership. So we've done quite a good thing, and obviously people are enjoying it. We get a lot of very positive comments, and we are going to have a little look, and I'm going to have a little bit of a think about the whole Patreon thing. I don't want to, certainly, it's a free magazine and it can stay a free magazine. But I
have to say, I find it astonishing that the whole concept of Patreon, the idea that somebody who's got something for nothing is then going to sort of go to church and go to the confession box and say, "Oh, look, I read this magazine for nothing. I must confess." And well, the poor box is over there. Go and stick a penny in it. I mean, I just don't believe it would work. But of course, it does work. Maybe I'm just an old cynic.
Yeah, it's caught me by surprise, Dick. I'm in the same camp as you. Like, oh yeah, who's going to do that? But if people are getting what they consider good, good entertainment, good information, you can see it. We all kind of think that, really, don't we? We'll have a look at it. I haven't made my mind up what to do, but I've had a lot of people, not one or two either, say, "Oh, look, we'd like to we'd like to contribute." So
I suppose it's a bit like when I was a kid. You'd always try and seek out a buoy in an anchorage somewhere and pick it up and buzz off in the morning before we had to pay for it. And now when I look back, I say to myself, well, I've done that for so many years as a kid when I was penniless that I feel obliged to pay, and quite happy to pay now, because I feel I'm paying back for all those times when I swung round the buoy for nothing. So fair enough. So anyway, Ocean Sailor latest magazine, that's the February issue, has just gone out. I must admit, I quite enjoyed compiling some of the material for that. And you've had a chance to look at it, Dick, I think. What did you take from it?
Yeah, Dick, your article on the Montgomery, it was fascinating. And it, as I sit here doing this podcast, I'm directly in line for the tsunami wave that would be caused by the Montgomery if it blew. I'll be the first one on the surfboard, I think. I'm literally, it's straight out in the Thames from where I'm sitting now in my old cottage down in Old Leigh. And, that whole story, it's been there all through my childhood as well. Everybody's known about the Montgomery, and if it blew, it was going to... It was going to wipe out Canvey, and it was going to cause this, go all the way up to the Thames and everything else. Because they've got the Thames barrier now to stop that kind of. I don't know if that was a factor, but so they're going to try and now sort it out and stabilise.
Yes,
it's a pretty good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah, a fascinating, great story.
Yeah, no, it is interesting because the new part of it being that the Royal Navy will be there this summer with these overseeing the construction of more or less a kind of an oil rig over the masts, and then they're going to take the masts off, cut them away. I'll tell you what, I want some serious money to be working that crane.
Well, yeah. I tell you what, Dick, if via your investigations you can find out when that whole thing goes in position, because I think that would be a good time for me to bugger off to Turkey.
Well, I can give you an early steer. It's looking like June. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, right. Okay. Blimey, that's interesting. Yeah, and there's some other really really good articles in there, and we got a lot lined up. So hopefully we've had some really very early good feedback on this month's Ocean Sailor. So, and I tell you what we're getting, which is great now. We're getting lots of questions coming in and lots of people saying, can we explain this, that, or the other?
Well, that's good.
So the section that... we call Ahoy, was just one or two fairly lightweight questions. But now people are asking some really in-depth, interesting questions. So, and that's great because that's what we want. You know, we don't know everything about everything, but we can generally find out if we don't know it ourselves.
Yeah,
you know, and that's
we know
great,
who to go to get the information. So that's good news.
Yeah, I've got a good network.
Yeah, brilliant. Also in the magazine, of course, I know it might seem a bit strange that we've gone and covered the Donald Crowhurst story, a man who's, of course, long been dead, lost at sea. But it is the 90th anniversary of Donald Crowhurst's birth, and it's a story that resonates with me because I interviewed his son on one of the anniversaries. I've forgotten which one now. But it's, and it's a story that just comes down through the years. It is ceaselessly fascinating. So for those who don't know it, I hope they do enjoy reading about it. But for those who do, we've also in the Mariner's Library talked about certainly one of the best books I've ever read, whether about the sea or anything else, and that's The Strange Voyage of Donald Crowhurst by the two Sunday Times reporters. And we've talked about the films that are available as well. The Pathé News one in particular, I think, is better than the Hollywood version. But anyway, all in there for those to
well,
see.
Dick, I mean, how very poignant that we're talking about Donald Crowhurst now, after just recording a podcast with Brian based on the psychology of ocean sailing. That's it, you know. I mean, and of course, we haven't even slightly gone into the psychology of sailing alone.
No, very true, absolutely.
That's another complete chapter. We have to try and get
that
somebody
would be
on
very good.
that can expand on that one.
Yes, Roy, of course, has done plenty of that. Has got quite a lot to say about it. Roy Hart, who I know quite well. I've done a little bit, but no great long.
Me too. I've
crossed the North Sea.
I don't prefer it. Some people like it.
Yeah.
But I personally, I have done quite a bit of single-handed, but spending the whole time continuously tired don't really work for me.
No, quite right. Anyway. I understand that. No, I haven't been any great distance, but I've certainly crossed the North Sea on my own and done a bit in the Channel and stuff, and the estuary. But no, it's the whole point is to be out there with somebody whose company you enjoy, and share it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how I see it as well, Dick. So yeah, okay. Good. Well, I guess that's all from me.
Well, one thing that I wanted to say was that there's some recent information. A new theory has come in about we all know the story of the Mary Celeste, the ship found sailing with a crewless ship. Well, some new information apparently. I don't know if you've seen it, but I saw it.
Where are we going?
Well,
with
apparently the latest theory is there was an outbreak of a coronavirus. Meaning that the on board ship, so the whole crew had to self-isolate in the longboat, and the novice cabin boy couldn't tie bowline.
God, Dick. Oh my!
I thought you'd like that one.
Yeah, very good, Dick. Yeah, okay.
Anyway, before we close down, having stunned you all with my Mary Celeste story, which I don't want cut, thank you very much, Mr. Producer Man. We have heard from Adam and Kiara, who our listeners will know have been on here before, the lively young couple of Millennial Falcon, and they've come on to tell us where they're going next. So I'm looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, that's another little extra that the listeners are going to have, because very kindly have sent us in a little update to go on the podcast. So that'll be interesting. They're a lovely couple, and I do wish them well.
Hello guys, and thank you very much for having us again.
Yeah, thank you for having us, guys. That was a really fun chat, and it's always a pleasure to talk about boats, especially with you, Dick, because I know how passionate you are about it.
I know that we recorded that podcast a little while ago now, so I just thought that we'd give a bit of an update as to what we're doing now, or what we've been doing since we recorded the podcast, and what our plans are. Well, I think in the podcast we mentioned that we were going to cross back east to west across the Atlantic, and we are now strategically placed for said crossing. We went from the Azores to Canaries, where we've been for the last month and a half, and tomorrow we plan to cross backwards again to the Caribbean.
Yeah, closing the loop on our first Atlantic circuit, what I hope will be the first in many, and feeling good, feeling ready. We've been just preparing the boat, and this is probably our first and this is definitely our longest leg. It's going to be 2,800 miles, and probably our longest downwind leg in the trades. And definitely the first time and the longest that we've sailed west.
I know.
I believe that 4 years is the first time we're going west.
I don't think we've ever done that.
So that'll be interesting.
So thanks so much again, guys. And it's always a pleasure. And we will see you on the other side.